with the story, beginning with the story of Cain and Abel, showing us that in the Quranic version of the Cain-Abel story, Abel is not silent, but Abel says to his brother Cain, I feel you are going to kill me. I will not retaliate. I will not retaliate your attempt to kill me because I trust in God. And Sadat Said shows convincingly that this is a strong tradition in the Islamic tradition. The Islamic tradition broke away very often from this tradition, but it's one of the traditions in the Islamic, in the Muslim tradition, which shows a potential for de-escalation. And I think as people interested in mimetic theory, we have to strengthen those potentials.
James, in your presentation, you forgot to say that the inventor of bossa nova, let's say. And so I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about Achever Clausewitz, but first I would like to say how moved I was by René's previous presentation on Chantal Republic. I think once again you've made an incredible breakthrough. There is a new museum in Paris that comes from this decision of Girard when he was still president. It's called the Musée des Arts Premiers. Premier here can mean primordial, primitive, etc. It's a pure aesthetization of the kind of art we saw. So the violence is completely expelled from the entire museum. It's a beautiful museum. It's worth your visit if you go to Paris. Absolutely incredible, but it's purely beautiful. So I'm not going to say thank you, but I think once more we've made an incredible breakthrough here. So let's talk about your work. First, I'd like to say a few words about the title, because reading the electronic forum led by Father Nushkala, I don't know if he's here, Nushkala. Yeah, Nushkala, yeah. I realized that many members of cover couldn't make sense of the French title. The word achever has nothing to do, it's a false friend, as we say in linguistics, with the English word to achieve. Actually, the Brits borrowed the French term and changed its meaning. So in French, achever has two different meanings, and the title is a play on words. First, it means to finish something that Clausewitz started, but it means also to finish off. That is, to kill Clausewitz. Achever Clausewitz means those two things at the same time. So René's absolutely great latest book is also his most apocalyptic. Achever Clausewitz means taking more seriously than Clausewitz himself did the Clausewitzian concept of escalation to the utmost extreme. And René goes so far as to make the assumption that perhaps the Christian message will have failed. The present perfect, as used by the same present perfect as the one used by Günther Anders in his magnificent parable of the flood that I described yesterday. The day after tomorrow, it will be too late. Who will know then that looking back, that it is too late? No human being will be left. Well, the only answer is God, of course. In private conversation, my friend Wolfgang here suggested that in every one of my slides that I showed yesterday, I should substitute the word God for every instance of the word future. I must confess that when I read for the first time the passage of René's book where he makes that assumption that Christianity may have already failed, I felt a chill down the spine. Maybe I've misread René, and that my first question to him, but I have a second point. and I would like to comment. I would like him to comment on that. And no venue, of course, seems more appropriate for that than a cover conference on catastrophe and the apocalypse. The second point, short point I'd like to make is about nuclear deterrence, and since you mentioned it, and then well, took that up, and also that will allow me to achever, to finish my conclusion, which I had to make a mess of yesterday for lack of time. But I think it's extremely relevant to our discussion of Clausewitz and to the discussion of René's beautiful book. Actually, I think that nuclear deterrence, and that's something that René didn't see, I agree with you. Well, let's not scapegoat René here. Nuclear deterrence represents precisely what Bob said we should be fearing, namely the expulsion of violence from the theory of war. Because nuclear deterrence led to, but nuclear deterrence is still the case. I mean, between India and Pakistan, maybe in the near future between Israel and Iran, maybe in the near future China and Japan, or the United States and China. So nuclear deterrence led to or leads to the the assimilation of moral catastrophes with natural catastrophes. I don't know if you're aware that the word Shoah that is being used by European Jews, they no longer use the term that is still being used in America, if I'm not mistaken, Holocaust, because Holocaust, that's a ritual, and the question is, what kind of God wanted this elimination of 6.5 million Jews? The word Shoah, which is used by the European Jews today, means, that's a word that pops up 3 times in the book of Job and elsewhere in the Bible, means only natural catastrophe, and more specifically, earthquake, tsunami. I don't know, and Günther Anders, whom I tried to comment on yesterday, went to Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1958. When he returned, he wrote a diary of Hiroshima, and he said, I don't understand. Those guys, the survivors, how they call the Ugarishi? No, okay, I don't remember the Japanese term. They have no resentment for what happened to them. It is as if what happened to them fell from the sky, and they use a Japanese term to designate what happened to them. It's the word tsunami. So both Hiroshima and Auschwitz are assimilated with natural catastrophes, as if there were no violent intention, no evil beyond that. And I think nuclear deterrence is responsible for that. So in a few words, let me achever my conclusion of yesterday. 32 times during the Cold War, according to McNamara, we were 10 seconds to midnight, including 7 times during the Cuban Missile Crisis. In the movie I wanted to show yesterday, the incredible movie called The Fog of War, and that's a reference to Clausewitz. It's a documentary made by a great American documentarist, Errol Morris of McNamara. Errol Morris asks McNamara whether he thought that nuclear deterrence saved us from nuclear annihilation. And McNamara answers, we lucked out. We lucked out. Let me recall that nuclear deterrence consists in threatening your enemy of complete destruction if he steps forward and threatens your vital interests. For a long time, nobody really understood how nuclear deterrence could indeed function. Because if nuclear deterrence functions, it functions. That's a tautology. But if it fails, suppose it fails, will you make good on your threat and take the risk of an escalation to the utmost extreme that will destroy you as well as your enemy?